Okay, so Peter, thank you very much for speaking to me about project management. I thought what I would do first is just ask you to introduce yourselves to the students and describe your background in project management.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's great to do this with you. And although I'm speaking to the students and I can't see them, welcome to the students. I've had many years of working in project management, and in fact right now, like you, I do teach project management, and I will be facing students, as I am now, shortly, both at Ryerson University and University of Toronto, here in Toronto where I live and where we're shooting this particular video for you. So I started off my career working for Bell Canada in the engineering department, and I worked there, and I moved into the IT department, and it was almost 20 years ago that my boss came to me and said, "Gee, Peter, you know something about this project management thing. Go get yourself certified." So I didn't really know anything about project management. I was just doing what I thought was my job. But I discovered PMI, Project Management Institute, and I got my PMP, Project Management Professional Certification. And as I was going through that, I realized I had been doing project management for all my working life, just didn't know it. And this is why often project management is called an accidental profession. So at that time when I discovered PMI, I discovered it was a professional organization that was run by volunteers. So I got involved with PMI as a volunteer. And as happens in many volunteer organizations, you can easily get promoted. I can remember the first meeting I went to, they were looking for volunteers, so I put up my hand and I left the meeting as Director of Membership Services. Anyway, I ended up being President of the Southern Ontario chapter here in Toronto. I got elected to the PMI Board of Directors, which I served for 6 years. I'm now no longer serving on the PMI board, and I had the great honor and privilege to be chair of the board in 2012. So I've had a broad variety of project management experience. I've seen it from a practitioner. I've worked on a number of projects, big and small. I've worked with large companies, Bell Canada. I was involved in a startup a couple of years ago, small companies. I've seen it from the professional point of view, and I've seen it from the classroom.
Wonderful, and a wealth of experience that the students will benefit from. So project management seems to be very high in people's mind at the moment. There's a lot of interest in it. Can you perhaps think about why that is?
Yes, I could always say it's because I've been on the board and out promoting it, but that's far from the truth. What we've seen, especially over the last few years since 2008, is that organizations have recognized they have to do more with less. Their competitors are no longer down the street. They're anywhere in the world. And they're working with their competitors have different rules that they can work with. So it becomes more and more imperative for organizations to be able to execute their strategic plan and to be able to execute it effectively and efficiently. The time of being able to start a strategic initiative or any initiative and have it fail is no longer an option. You cannot afford the money that you lose on projects failing or initiatives failing. So what we're seeing now is that increasingly organizations recognize this need, that they need to make sure they're competitive, they need to make sure that they're doing things as efficiently as possible, meeting their customers' needs, meeting the needs of the clients. They need to be launched new products and services, either to meet their clients' objectives or to the needs of their clients or to improve their productivity. And how else are they going to do this except through projects? Projects are the way that you change an organization. You launch new products, you change the way or things are done within an organization. That's how it's done. So organizations see this, they see the need for this. And that's why I think we're seeing an increasingly more use of project management and organizations recognizing that they need to learn how to do projects properly in their organization because they cannot afford to fail anymore.
Okay, so you began by talking about your own experience in the Project Management Institute. Could you tell the students what the Project Management Institute is? Maybe give them a bit of an introduction.
Sure, I'll be glad to. So PMI, the Project Management Institute, is a global organization. It was founded in 1969 in the United States by 5 people who thought that there should be something around a professional body in project management. So they created PMI, and it was designed to be like most professional bodies that you may be aware of, so engineers, doctors, lawyers, to do basically 2 things. One is to advocate on behalf of the profession, to make sure that individuals and organizations understand why project management is important and important to them, and why it's important they have project management skills in the case of individuals, or organizations, why they know how to support projects within the organization. The second thing is that PMI supports the practitioner, those people doing project management, and they do it through a number of ways. There's the standard, the PMBOK guide, there's certification. I already mentioned the PMP. There's a few other certifications, including the CAPM. They have courses and training that they have. Some that PMI does, but mostly they support a network of professional or trainers, the Registered Education Program. They've established ethics for practitioners. These are all the hallmarks of a profession that PMI will support. And they do this globally. So just to give you an idea of the size, there's almost 500,000 members of PMI around the world. About half of them are in North America. We have about 50,000 in Canada. There's over 700,000 PMPs around the world. Again, the proportion is somewhat similar, although I will say that we're seeing the highest growth rate of PMPs in China right now.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that gives you a brief overview of PMI.
Thank you. And so for students who are interested in project management, could you perhaps tell them why they might be interested in the PMI? What would it help them with?
And I get that question quite often. So I think there's a couple of things that would be helpful for students. One is the network, the ability to meet with practitioners, project managers, and find out more of what they're doing, but also allow you to network to get a job. I mean, it's clearly shown from everything I've done and from the stories the students have shared with me, the way you get a job is through a network. So PMI provides a network of project managers who are going to be looking for people to help out on projects. So it's a great way to get a job. It also gives you access to material that PMI has available on their website for members on how to practice project management better. So you have access to that part as well. And then, of course, if all else fails, there's the member discounts, especially when you get thinking about getting certifications or buying material, you get a member discount. So those would be the 3 main things I would think of. And that's what we see that most people come to PMI for, to the network, the knowledge, and the discounts.
Sounds valuable.
Yeah.
So the PMI, as you've mentioned, exists internationally. Could you talk about the presence that there is there and how that may benefit a student too?
Absolutely, Peter. And one of the huge benefits that PMI has, being a global organization, is their certifications are global. So I'm a professional engineer by training. I'm a member of Professional Engineers of Ontario. If I want to go and practice in another province in Canada, in another country, I have to get recertified by that political jurisdiction. That's not the case with project management. The PMP is the same across the world. Anywhere in the world is recognized. So as a student, and you may be interested in looking, and many of my students are, to travel elsewhere, to travel back to another country where maybe your parents were born or you were born, that this becomes valuable because this becomes a certification that is recognized globally that you don't have to apply to be recognized in the local country. So I think that's one of the huge advantages of PMI being global. The other is the network. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world, both in my work as well as my volunteer role on the PMI board. And I find it amazing wherever I go, there's a chapter. There's a chapter in just about every country in the world. There's certainly members of every country in the world. You can go in and there's some people that speak the same language as you, the language of project management, that you can connect with. And I've developed friendships all over the world, and sometimes I've had to call on those friendships to help me out in various situations. So there's the two aspects of it that I think is the advantage of PMI is being global.
Wonderful. And on the other side of that, the local organization of the PMI is also something that students might find valuable.
And it is very valuable. So within Canada, we have 18 chapters of project management, PMI chapters. In Ontario, there are 6. So in the London area, there's the Southwestern Ontario chapter. In Kitchener, Waterloo, there's the Canadian Technology Triangle chapter. In the Toronto area, there are actually 3 others. There's the Southern Ontario chapter in Toronto, which is the second largest chapter in the world with almost 5,000 members. There's the Lakeshore chapter around Mississauga, Hamilton, Burlington, which has over 2,000 members, and the Durham Highlands chapter to the east in the Oshawa area. And there's a 6th chapter up in Ottawa, Outaouais region. So the local chapters become the presence of PMI locally. So we talked about the networking and how important that is. Well, you have to meet people to network. And yes, we can do that virtually, and PMI has opportunities to do that online through their projectmanagement.com. But to physically meet people, that's where you need to get involved with the local chapter. You can attend chapter events, which will have speakers talking about their experiences in project management or introducing new tools and techniques that will help you become a better project manager. Or you can volunteer in the local chapter, just as I started doing 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, and meet people and show people what sort of things you can do. I can still remember, if I may digress very briefly,
Sure.
When I started volunteering at the local chapter, there were 2 wonderful students from Ryerson University who were volunteering, and they're absolutely wonderful. And I know that one of them I've been able to keep track of, and her volunteering work helped her get a great job with IBM when she graduated and allowed her to do well in her career.
Wonderful. So the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, has been developed by the PMI. Can you talk about what that is, how it's been developed, and how it will continue to be developed in the future, I guess?
Oh, Peter, PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge. No, the book that's being published is a guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge. Because in fact, we don't think there is a definitive body of knowledge for project management. It's still growing, it's still evolving. So this is a guide to it, so the PMBOK guide. Obviously, I spent too long with PMI, but so the PMBOK guide is a ANSI standard. ANSI is the American National Standards Institute, which is part of ISO, the International Standards Organization. And in fact, the chapter 3 of the PMBOK guide is now an international standard, ISO 21500. I had the honor and the privilege to be chair of the Mirror Committee for the development of ISO 21500 before I got elected to the PMI board. So it's a standard. If any of you have had the chance to look at it, I say to my students, it's a great cure if you're having trouble falling asleep. By about the 2nd page, you're out for the night, or nap, or whatever it is. It's a standard. So what the PMBOK guide does is it provides a framework of processes of how projects can be planned and executed, monitored and controlled. The idea is that this is a comprehensive framework, and that one of our responsibilities as a project manager is to decide which of those processes are appropriate for our project. The very simple example for this, there's a knowledge area within the PMBOK guide around procurement. And true, many projects do buy products and services from vendors, but not all projects. You may be working on an internal project where this is not being necessary. So don't ignore that part. You don't have to work on all the things to deal with procurement because you won't have any for your project. So you do need to look at it, but it does provide that overall framework, and it's an excellent way to start when you start thinking about a project and thinking about what do I need to do, what do I need to think about to do. You need to think about scope, you need to think about time and schedule, and you think about cost, quality, and communications, human resources, risk, and so on.
Okay, thank you. So in recent years, stakeholder management has become more prominent inside the PMBOK guide. and it's featured more in the focus of the PMI. Can you talk about why that is and why it's more important now?
I don't think it's more important now. I think it's always been important. Your observation is correct. I mean, ever since the first edition of the PMBOK guide was published in '96, the stakeholders were there. They were part of communications, because generally that's what you do, is you communicate to stakeholders. So in the fifth edition, which was published back in 2013, I hate saying published back in 2013, the stakeholders became the 10th knowledge area. So it raised in its profile. It's not that it was raised in importance and so on. So just a little bit along my perspective of history here. So initially, when PMI was formed in 1969, there had been a lot of work done, especially in the US, around the Cold War and the space race. There were some very large, complex projects. Gee, let's put a man on the moon in 8 years. They talk about some of the nuclear submarine programs that the US was trying to do as part of the Cold War. And these projects were incredibly expensive, and they started building a reputation of being very late. And they were, in reality, they were extremely complex with new technology and developing new technology. So there was a lot of focus on the technical part of project management. How to build a good schedule, how to build a good budget, how to select and assign resources. So a lot of this was in the early part of project management in the 1970s, 60s and 70s, was trying to develop and refine these. And certainly the advent of computer programs helped immensely to do this. By the time I got involved in 1990, in the 1990s, there were a lot of talk about projects are still failing. We have these project managers who are technicians. They sit in their office poring over computer programs to build the perfect schedule, to figure out what the critical path is, and how to manage that. They don't talk to anybody. They don't share with people what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, that's my first memory of a project manager, or someone called him a project manager. He sat in his office poring over the computer all day. Meanwhile, the rest of us did work. So there was an advent of, we needed communication skills, we needed soft skills. Project managers had to be able to communicate with people, had to be able to negotiate. I know as I grew and became a project manager and started talking to my stakeholders, right, I had to negotiate with them how this change request that they wanted was really an excellent thing to start with phase 2 of the program and not to put into the current program, otherwise we would miss the date. So that has been growing, and I would say, as people are looking at giving project managers leadership skills, communication skills, this is the reason why there's a focus on stakeholders, because those are the people, whether they be your client, whether they be the project sponsor, whether they be your team member, that you need to be able to communicate with and communicate in their language. You need to be able to negotiate with, you need to be able to encourage. The times I've had to go and hate to have to admit this, but the times I've had to go to my team members and say, I need you to work yet another weekend to get the project in on time. So how am I going to do that in a respectful way, in a balanced way, respecting their family life and their health and so on? So we need people with more of those skills and be more aware of what the stakeholders is. So that's where we are, and I think that's why stakeholders have become more prominent in the PMBOK guide, recognition of that. If I may continue with my journey a little bit. So back in the 90s, the Standish Corporation produced the Chaos Report, which showed a third of the projects were successful, 2/3 were failing. We're now seeing that organizations who have a high level of project management maturity, and I'm sure Peter will ask me to define that shortly, are getting up to around 2/3 of the time they're successful. But still a third left. So I think the next thing that there's going to be a focus on as project managers is for us to understand business, for us to understand our organization. What is their strategy and how do they make money? Okay, so you work for a government or you're not for profit, you say, I don't make money. Okay, I've worked for not-for-profit, PMI, or volunteered for them. I've worked for quasi-government agencies. We all need money. You may not go out and sell products or services per se, but you're getting grants, you're getting donations. There's a source of revenue somewhere, okay? Because someone's paying you, right? It's not coming, you're not doing work out of the goodness of your heart. They don't call it work if you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. So understand the business model of your organization. Where's the money coming from? Where's the money going? And I think those are the skills that are going to take us to get to much higher success in projects meeting their objectives, being viewed as successful.
Thank you. So for students who are interested in project management and thinking about sitting their PMP or CAPM exam, you teach people as in project management. Have you got any tips that you'd like to give them to prepare for the exams?
Absolutely. 3. So the difference between the PMP and the CAPM is somewhat substantial, and probably leave it for you to discuss in class with Peter or others. But basically, to keep it simple for the purpose of this exercise, for the PMP, you need 3 years of work experience and a university degree. For the CAPM, you just need a high school diploma. So we'll leave it at that. So both of them require some training to be done. In the case of the PMP, supporting work experience. Then you have to sit for an exam. So the first thing is get your experience together. So first thing is, I guess, when you decide between the PMP and the CAPM, if you have the work experience, go to the PMP. As I said, there's over 700,000 PMPs in the world. There's about 25,000 CAPMs. So is much more recognized, and certainly knowing the Toronto market here, if companies are hiring project managers who have their PMP. So they're being pre-screened if you don't. So if you have work experience, get your PMP. If you don't, look at the CAPM at least as a signal that you're interested in a career in project management. So to write the exams, you need 3 things. So you need to have the work experience, the education experience, and you need to write the exam. So to write the exam, you need 3 things. One is the skills and knowledge that the exam is going to be tested on. PMP is based on the roles and responsibilities of a project manager. They have a PMI publishes a role delineation study. So you're going to be tested on more situational questions, more about what would you do in a particular situation as a project manager, what we expected to be done. The language of the exam is based on the PMBOK guide. The CAPM is a test on the PMBOK guide. So I probably shouldn't so readily admit this, but you can think about it as a memorization exam. You know, kind of like some of Peter's exams, just memorize the textbook, you'll do okay. Just teasing Peter. Don't take that for gospel, I don't know. So then you have to, so make sure you have the skills and knowledge. The next thing, that's one. The next thing you have to do is get some practice questions. Back in the day when I wrote my PMP exam back in 1996, there were still a few questions based on the U.S. aero defense industry in the exam. Luckily, those have all been weeded out. But get some sample questions, lots available in the database, and practice those. Those will show the areas of weakness where you are. And then the third thing is be physically ready. The PMP is a 4-hour exam. There's 200 questions. The CAPM is a 3-hour exam with 125 questions. None of us in today's age sit still and concentrate for 3 or 4 hours. So take these sample questions that you have, go to a quiet place in your house and write the question, write the exam, see what it's like, right? So you have to be trained, right? So you have to eat right, drink right, sleep right to get ready.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. My last question. Have you got any final words of advice for aspiring project managers? Things that they might want to think on as they plan a successful project management career?
One of the things that I've enjoyed and really seen, I guess there's a couple of things, but I've already mentioned, in my case, being involved with PMI, the great network of friends and colleagues I have from all over the world. But the other thing that I think is so important in today's age, and even starting a few years ago, when we talk about the job that you will first start with, or the job you will have during your career may not exist now. And I know a certain point in my life where I was working in computer programs, when I started working, those jobs didn't exist. And project management is a career, it's a skill set that will allow you to move between industry sectors, will allow you to add value to organizations, even though their underlying products or services that they're producing may not exist today. You will still be able to add value through the skills that you have of knowing how to make sure that that project not only comes in on time, on budget, on scope, but meets the business, but delivers value for the organization and meets the strategic, to allow the organization to achieve its strategic objectives. Organizations, I believe, will always need that. And this is a way of, if you like, if I can use a project management term, responding to a risk of the changing environment to ensure that you are going to get yourself employable initially to get that first job, which I know is very competitive today, and allow you to continue to get interesting, challenging jobs, either here in Canada or anywhere in the world, and in very industry sectors. So I think that's something that's very powerful, and I think something that everyone who starts off today in a career needs to make sure that they are acquiring skills that allow them to continue to add value as the world changes so quickly.
Well, thank you, Peter, for taking the time today, being very generous with your time to record this video and have it available for the students, and hopefully for many of them, this will be something that helps them to consider a project management career carefully, and for many of them to move forward into.
My pleasure, Peter, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to your students. If you want to follow up with me, Google me. I'm there.
Thank you.